Keith Shiri is a curator of African film, and an art exhibitor, based in Beirut, Lebanon, and London, where he serves as program advisor to the British Film Institute. Zimbabwean by birth, Shiri has been an African Movie Academy Awards (AMAA) juror since the ceremony's inception, in 2004. In the second of Vanguard's exclusive interviews with jurors and movie makers, the film and television pundit makes J.K. Obatala privy to AMAA's elaborate decision-making process. At the same time, he also probes the attenuated evolution of cinematography on the continent, decrying insufficient attention to the African aesthetic. Asterisk 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 walk me through a season of AMAA decision-making. Well, last year, we processed more than 800 movies. But it wasn't just the jury. We have people who pre-select films. The entries were eventually pruned to about half of that number. After pruning, the residue is sent to us. And then we go through the nomination process, which, in 2017, was at Kigali, Rwanda. The next stage is the awards. That's when we hold the final round of deliberations. Our task is to discuss the shortlisted films and confer awards for Best Film, Best Director, Best Actor, Best Design, etc. Where do most of your entries come from? As usual, quite a number are from Nigeria. But many of those shortlisted were from Senegal. South Africa is always well represented. We also get film from the African diaspora, especially South America and the USA. I hear lots of talk about a rebirth of filmmaking in Senegal and the Francophone states. No. There's nothing like that. People are always assuming that there's a kind of new beginning, or a renaissance, or something. There is a process. Africa is evolving, as are other continents. But this is not to say that something special is happening. I think it would be wrong to start thinking there is a rebirth. But there was a time when French-speaking African countries were very far advanced in filmmaking. Then they went into a slump and Nigeria took over, so to speak. There's nothing like Nigeria taking over. Nigeria became more prominent. There's not even anything like more prominent. There's no cinema, that much to talk about in Nigeria. I mean film. There's no film. There's audio-visual productions, yes. But may not necessarily be cinema, i.e., if you want to talk about the aesthetics of cinema. People should not be confused by the volume of televisual dramas Nigeria is turning out, as compared to cinema, in the aesthetic sense. It's like, you know, an apples and oranges scenario. Does the jury judge television drama? Or only movies? No, 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 we talk about productions that are presented to us as movies. Sometimes, you can disqualify something because it represents a different set of things. That's how we prune films, in the beginning of the process. We discuss and decide, according to what we want to project, within the AMAA brand. What genre seems to be developing fastest? Short film, features. I mean, it's so complex, let me put it this way, all genres are evolving. Would you expand on that? Yes. Once upon a time, filmmaking posed a severe challenge to countries which were economically weak. You needed a laboratory to develop your film, plus all these big cans, and so on. But that doesn't apply anymore. I think the real challenges are weak storytelling practices. There's no country, no society that doesn't tell stories. We all tell our stories. It's a question of transformation, from oral history to written text, from the solitary performances of poets and sculptors, to the collaborative process of filmmaking. Like any other part of the world, we have our own traditions, our own ways of telling a story, through sculpture, through painting, through music, etc. There has always been a process. But the transformation, the challenge, is, how do we relate our storytelling abilities to the task of transferring tales onto the screen? How does this transformation relate to Francophone dominance? In the beginning, the French intervened with their own solution. They provided the resources for Africans, resulting in what I call the Francophone filmmaking model. The French colonialists were looking at talented movie makers, whom they would give an opportunity to train in Paris. They encouraged cinematography that was in sync with their own realities. So, you had early African filmmakers in Senegal, Burkina Faso, Niger, Cameroon and virtually the whole of French-speaking Africa. Francophone cinema got a head start. Well, kind of, because indigenous filmmakers in those regions benefited from the French model. They had support from the colonial government. But they paid a price. There had to be a political synergy with France. Hence they were not real African cinematographers, you know. Their cinema was in consonance with the French mandate. It was a colonial cinema. Absolutely. Nigerians were kind of smart. They didn't follow the colonial model quite as closely. The British were not so much engaged with cinema as the French. There was a colonial film unit. Some British were making films in Ghana, Nigeria, the Federation of Rhodesia and Nyasaland, for example, as Zimbabwe, Zambia and Malawi used to be called. But it was not cinema, as it was developing in French-speaking Africa. So, how does this play out in the contemporary context? Today, with the combined effects of independence, democracy in South Africa and the availability of digital technology, freedom to produce is massive and continent-wide. Now, we are seeing many more films. The problem, though, is that, sometimes movies are made too fast, with very little attention to the details of aesthetics, the African aesthetic. This deficiency needs to be addressed. You have to learn film aesthetics. It's not like painting, do you know, which we've been doing for thousands of years. We have artists in Nigeria and in Zimbabwe. We have artists everywhere. I'm talking about the Oshogbo group of artists. I'm talking about the Zimbabwean stone sculptors, Milangatana Gwenya of Mozambique, etc. Africans have always been exhibiting their work, either through murals or through sculpture parks, as a means of telling their stories. But storytelling through the screen is different. What about countries from places like South America and the South Pacific? Are you getting any film from those regions? Yes. In 2017, we had entries from Martinique and Brazil, for instance. In fact, Brazil shared the joint award for Best Short Film in the African Diaspora category. Once again, you cannot identify a growth area in African cinema, such as the short, the feature, or science fiction. No. I've told you, I don't quantify film in that sense. I'd be giving you meaningless statistics. There are qualitative factors, aesthetics, that you cannot express statistically. Academics often try to. That's okay. But it doesn't take aesthetics, the artistic aspect, into account. African film is evolving, in this regard, like cinema in the rest of the world. I didn't see any science fiction nominations last year. And you had only 2 animated film. Look, let me tell you how the process works. AMAA does not put a gun to somebody's head and say, your film or your life. People submit on their own volition. We don't go out to source film. AMAA is not like a festival, which actively seeks people to attend. It's people who know about the brand that enter their film. If more Nigerians are aware and interested, for example, more Nigerians will submit their movies. But this is not necessarily a measure of what is happening on the continent. Tell me something about Keith Shiri. I'm not very good at talking about myself. I'm just a program advisor for BFI, the British Film Institute. That's all. I was born in Zimbabwe. and I live in London and Beirut. I read film and television at the University of London. How did you get to be an AMAA juror? Because I read film and television, laughing. And I do exhibitions of African cinema. I've also done a lot of things on African art. That's why I talk so much about art and aesthetics. I'm very interested in the African aesthetic. I'm interested in African storytelling and also in theatre. In short, I'm interested in African representation, if you like. Many of the entries people were expecting to win big last year, such as 93 Days and 76, didn't do very well, no. Because we're independent. We discuss. We all have different opinions. There's a group of us. But we're all coming from different backgrounds. We talk. We agree about cinema, the structure, the story and everything. And then we decide. There are 5 films per category, 8 for the best film. And there are 10 of us. We each will have to look at every film, maybe 3 times, so you have to really convince me before I vote for a particular entry. Which categories are most difficult to judge? It's often Best Director and Best Film. I don't know how it will play out in 2018. But last year it was different. Almost all of us agreed. Consequently, deciding Best Film and the Best Director was quite easy. For the first time, during the deliberations, I was in the majority camp. I slept very well that night.